What's your favorite fruit?
Pears.
Pears. Good. Okay. Let's say.
Oh,
all
no,
you
wait.
ever had was
Apples.
apples. Fine. Let's say all you ever knew were apples. Apples, apples, and more apples. You might think apples were pretty good, even if you got a rotten one once in a while. But then one day, there's an orange. And now you can make a decision. Do you want an apple, or do you want an orange? That's democracy.
I also like bananas.
Election is a 1999 satirical dark comedy film directed by Alexander Payne, starring Matthew Broderick, Reese Witherspoon, Chris Klein, Jessica Campbell, and more. Let's take a quick look.
If you're one of the millions of Americans who still believes that honesty, integrity, and fidelity are the cornerstones of our democracy, we suggest you wait for another preview before getting your popcorn. In the nation's capital, a new leader has found a place in the halls of power. But her story began in the halls of high school.
We'll move on now to the presidential race with 3 candidates running. The first is Tracy Flick.
One thing that's important to know about me is that I'm an only child. My mom is really devoted to me. She likes to write letters to successful women like Elizabeth Dole and Connie Chung and ask them what advice do they have for me, Tracy, her daughter.
The next candidate for student body president is Paul Metzler.
I just don't think somebody would do something like that on purpose.
I think you did it.
And if you want to keep questioning me like this, I won't continue without my attorney present. I do not often speak with you and ask for things, but now I really must insist that you help me win the election tomorrow, because I deserve it and Paul Metzler doesn't, as you well know.
The final candidate, sophomore Tammy Metzler.
I'm attracted to the person. It's just that all the people I've ever been attracted to happen to be girls.
You should stop her. She's not qualified.
We can't both run, can we? I mean, we're brother and sister. Can we? Tracy and I are totally in love.
In love?
Yeah.
So is this a moral situation or an ethical situation?
When I win the presidency, that means you and I are going to be spending a lot of time together.
Cast your vote for Tracy Flick next week. You won't just be voting for me. You'll be voting for yourself.
Who knew how high she would climb in life? I had to stop her.
Excuse me! Will you please be quiet?
Now.
Paramount Pictures presents an MTV Films production.
Order! Order!
Starring Matthew Broderick, Reese Witherspoon.
Hey, what happened to your eye?
What happened to your eye? Are you okay, Mr. McAllister?
I'm fine.
On the road to greatness. Never underestimate an overachiever.
Looks like you could use a cupcake.
Election. Cast your vote.
Or don't vote at all!
So welcome back to the Cult of Films. I am so happy to be talking about one of my favorite films of all time. When I sit around and kind of think about what films would be good for this show, some of them you could just kind of check off the box, like A Battery's Not Included. Yes, it's a great film, but man, it was just like a smash hit and made way too much money. Really considered like a cult-like film. I like to talk about movies that maybe weren't as successful, whether that be in the box office or just liked in the mainstream in general. I like to put a spotlight on films that perhaps didn't get the love that I feel like they deserved. I was going down memory lane and thinking of beloved films from my past, and then I like, oh, Election, yeah, there's absolutely no way. Then I saw that it came out in 1999, arguably one of the best years in cinema ever, and this thing had an $8 million budget, and it only made $17 million. You know what else came out that year? Office Space. You know what made less than Election? Office Space. But first we have to talk about Election. I remember seeing this film in the theaters. I absolutely adored it. Even back in 1999 when I was probably like 12 years old. This is definitely one of the funniest films of our generation. Not even from a traditional cast of comedians either. Matthew Broderick has had an up and down career. Ferris Bueller's Day Off is of course a legendary performance, but I would argue Matthew Broderick as Jim McAllister in Election might be his best performance of his entire career. So let's just broad stroke and talk about this film real quick. This is critically acclaimed, but an absolute financial bomb. And even in the cinematic minefield that was 1999, this film still to garner an Academy Award nomination nomination for Best Adapted Screenplay, an award that Alexander Payne would not win this year, but would go on to win 2 for Sideways and The Descendants. Also gave Reese Witherspoon a Golden Globe nomination for Best Actress, as well as an Independent Spirit Award for Best Film that year. Story of Election is adapted from a novel by Tom Perrotta. The film centers around a likable and decorated teacher in Omaha, Nebraska, Jim McAllister, played by Matthew Broderick, also an overachieving young student in Tracy Flick, and her campaign to run for the student body president. One of Jim's colleagues, a fellow teacher, has an inappropriate relationship with the young Tracy Flick. Character Jim McAllister is seemingly a good man, cares for his students, kind of like a medium fish in a small pond. He wins multiple Teacher of the Year awards. He's extremely liked by all of his students, but at this point is tired of the Tracy Flicks in the world kind of using him as a stepping stone to go on to bigger and better things, where I think that he is very happy with his station in life and his position in life, being an educator and kind of reaching kids. So Tracy's interactions with Jim McAllister start to manifest these undesirable traits that I guess he's been suppressing for so long, such as infidelity, dishonesty, and even misogyny, where he feels very vindicated and justified to stop Tracy by any means. Watching this film again recently, I feel like that was one of the tones that I guess I didn't pick up on when I was watching this when I was younger, is how just misogynistic this, not only Jim McAllister is, but this whole kind of school and this whole setup. The whole framework of being a success in this small town is someone like a silver spoon-fed jock stereotype like a Paul Metzler played by Chris Klein, where these children of the elite, especially these male children, are already kind of preordained to be bestowed with these kind of advantages in life, where someone like a Paul Metzler, even though seemingly a nice person, doesn't really have to work for anything. He just kind of, oh, good things happen to him. One of the funnier parts in the film, he's praying, thanking God for what he's been told by many as a large penis size, but also asking to forgive his sins, whatever they may be. Has this kind of sick, twisted, idolistic fan worship from his peers and the people around him, just from the family that he's kind of spawned from. And on the other side, you have Tracy Flick has to fight tooth and nail every advantage in every position that she attains. Tracy's character is kind of vilified throughout. We as the audience are supposed to be kind of rooting for Jim McAllister, even though he's this kind of horrible, like, misogynistic person. And we're supposed to kind of hate Tracy, but you kind of like, it's just like, oh wow, she's like this statutory rape survivalist and kind of willing to put out her blood, sweat, and tears for every position that she gets in life, despite the odds stacked against her. But the movie does it in such a way where it kind of shows you that no one is truly the villain and no one is truly a hero. You have kind of the monkey wrench thrown in, kind of like the Ross Perot, which is Tammy Metzler, the adopted sister of Paul Metzler. And she's kind of the anti-establishment that both her brother and Tracy have to kind of overcome, because, Paul is just happy to be there. He's like the reluctant, kind of soft-headed dummy. He's the quintessential, like, star jock, but then he gets hurt in like a snowboarding or a skiing accident. Jim McAllister kind of talks him into kind of giving back to the community that he so rules, and, to run for the student body president at all. And as Jim states later on in the film, it's not like they're electing the fucking Pope, but to these specific people, whoever wins gets to put it on their college transcript, and it's just another kind of notch in Tracy's belt to kind of further her career. Paul Metzler's just kind of in it for the party, and I'm just going to say, quick spoiler alert for a movie in 1999 that I'm sure if you found a show called The Cult of Films that you probably 99% I'm sure that you've probably watched the movie Election, but however, for the two people that haven't, spoiler alert ahead, the results of the election become rigged, and Mr. McAllister kind of, after a series of unfortunate events, going through like bee stings on the eyeball and infidelity with his wife, despite Paul Metzler being the more liked student body head, Tracy still wins the election. And it's like, you could see from the very beginning when they're both doing their speeches during the assembly, like, even though that everyone thinks that Tracy's kind of like an annoying little like chihuahua, she's still like, people trust her to make these kind of decisions. And like, Paul gets up there and he's like reading everything from this horrible script like a 2-year-old. And yeah, he's still getting some like cheers from his jock friends, but everyone still kind of turns out and votes Tracy to win. It's so razor thin that Jim throws away 2 of the votes to put Paul Metzler over the top. And even with his first night on the job, all he wants to do is just kind of plan these like awesome like kegger parties with his newfound power. At that moment, you could just see Jim McAllister's face, just like, oh God, I've made a terrible decision. It's eerie how similar this movie is to the 2016 election. You have this, upstart, well-qualified, not so liked person on one side, and then you have this super charismatic, not very qualified person. I mean, from top to bottom, this is just a absolutely immaculate film. Superb writing, great editing. From a shot composition, like James Glennon did a fine job. He was the cinematographer for Flight of the Navigator. He has since passed, unfortunately, I think like 2 years after this film was made, but he did some great jobs with some like real fun close-up shots, some well-placed freeze frames, and the best use of voiceover ever. I think that, like, I am not a voiceover fan at all in films, especially that's why I'm not a huge like Terrence Malick fan, but in this film it kind of bounces from POV to POV character, and you get everyone's kind of inner monologue, because this film has such a tone of duality of it shows perfectly when Tracy's standing in line to get her diploma. She's just standing there just like completely blank-faced, like anything could be happening around her, and then they call her name and she kind of perks up, she puts on this big fake smile. And that's what's going on with Jim McAllister the whole time. Who he is in front of his wife or his colleagues or his other fellow students is not who he is until the very end, until Matthew Broderick just starts losing it and just like starts yelling and being very curmudgeonly and starts showing the real him that he's kind of suppressed down inside, until Tracy kind of gives him no choice but to actually be the real, arguably toxic person he has always been. 2 characters that are who they are is probably Paul and Tammy Metzler. Tammy's an outwardly just batshit crazy, young, confused, angry, angsty teenager, sexually frustrated. And then you have Paul Metzler, who, again, everyone's just constantly filleting him, figuratively and actually. Of course, he doesn't have a care in the world. He's just happy to be there, even though he like goes and shatters his leg. He still finds a way to have a good time and have a good party. It's funny that Office Space and this film came out in the same year. It has virtually the same exact sex scene where Jim McAllister is trying to get his wife pregnant. You have like Peter's character from The Office. You put those 2 scenes like shot by shot next to each other, and you have like the floating heads. It's kind of funny. And these films came out, I think, like 3 months apart. I think one of them was in February, one of them was April. So I'm sure either, Alexander Payne or Mike Judge wasn't stealing from the other one. And did they come up with the same kind of movie in general? So I always thought that Election and Office Space were very similar in tone, even though that they're made by 2 different people. This feels very much like a Mike Judge film, but Mike Judge films like Extract feels like it could be one of Alexander Payne's films. Like, this feels related to Sideways as well, which is another one of my favorite films of all time. That movie made way too much money to be on Cult of Films. But what else can you say about a film that came out in 1999 that's been analyzed to death? I just wanted to give my short thoughts on Election. It's been one of my favorite films of all time. One of the films that really got me wanting to talk about films and to look into movies more than just like a surface level, just to find out more about them. And I'm just so glad that I got a chance to do it now. And this is a film that once you watch it again with today's social climate, you don't realize how toxic and how disgusting Jim McAllister really is. Back in 1999, at least I didn't. And now watching it, I'm just like, God, he is just so hard to root for. Although, again, the performances up and down, absolutely incredible. This is an A+ film. This is one of the comedic pillars. This is a must-watch for anyone that's into film, and I'm sure, again, you all already have. Tell me about your thoughts about Election in the comments below. I would love to hear about it. Give this video a thumbs up. Share it around on the social medias. Tell everyone that this project exists. If you want to talk more films with me, you can. You could reach me on Twitter @OrzovDone. And until next time, vote for me.